Hello and welcome to another installment of Show and Tell, where I share with you all of the antiques that I've bought and used books that I've read since the last time I made one of these videos, which I believe was in the spring and now it's fall. I didn't buy this all at once. I have some restraint. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who actually watches my videos, especially since I break the golden rule of YouTube, which is consistency. I have a lot of trouble, posting a video every week. I often don't post for a month or multiple months on end. Let's dive in to the antiques. This, as I'm sure you can tell, is a lamp. It didn't look like this when I bought it though. When I bought it, the light bulbs were these heart light bulbs, like there were these LED hearts inside of light bulbs. And it just seemed like such a cool, funky love lamp. I plugged it in at the antique store to see if the light bulbs worked, and I burned my retinas because they were so bright. But I was like, well, maybe it's fine. I don't know. Like I was debating, and then I decided, okay, I'll just buy it. Then I had a little bit of regret. The light bulbs were just way too bright. Cue me spending days and days looking at light bulbs online. I thought, well, the beauty of the lamp and the reason that I bought it is because it's so feminine, it's so pretty. And so ultimately I settled on these light bulbs. Unfortunately, they're a little too bright for my liking. Regardless, even with the light bulbs off, it's still so pretty. I'd love to know what you think. Next is this beautiful, lovely little glass jar. It is so cute. I don't know if this is actually an antique. I'm trying to figure out what to put in it. I'm like, oh, glow-in-the-dark eyeballs or something. I don't know. What do you imagine would look nice in this? Oh my gosh. I saw this at a garage sale. He's so cute. He's like this rat. He's a citizen of Londonshire. Can you see that? And now the question is, do I take him out of the box and use him as a decoration? He's so cute. He's so cute. I bought this at a garage sale, suspecting that it is uranium glass, and then spent the next long amount of time not knowing if I had uranium glass on my hands. And if you don't know, uranium glass it's a type of glass that was made. It has little bits of uranium in it, safe amounts of uranium in it, and it glows under blacklight. And it's quite the collector's item. A lot of people enjoy collecting uranium glass, but I haven't had a blacklight to test it. I got a little blacklight flashlight and aimed it at it, and here's the result. And so I'm thinking, yes, it must be uranium glass, but I'm not 100% convinced, so I'm gonna put it through a couple more tests. Check that out, right? This beautiful pennant. Saw it, had to have it. I'll show you one small item. I was in London, it's a Friends reference, and I bought this pin. Oh my God. So there are markings on the inside that indicates when and where this was made. And I looked, and it's from the 1800s. So it is Victorian, from the UK, so legit Victorian, and I am in love. Beautiful. Look at these beautiful candle sconces. Metal, gorgeous, right? So pretty. Now I just need to figure out where to put these. I got this at a garage sale. It's this beautiful old box. And I saw basically the exact same one, weirdly, coincidentally, in an antique store like the next day, and it said handmade in Spain. So I'm going to do some more research on this to figure out anything else I can about this beautiful wooden box. Okay, and the last thing I'll show you is this silhouette. So the frame and the backing looks new, so I'm not thinking it's an antique or anything. But the actual silhouette itself seems like it could be old. So when I saw this, I was wondering if I could find out any more information about it. So I went up to the front at the antique mall and I asked if they could call the seller and see the story behind it, because there's no information at all. And the seller told them, oh yeah, I don't know where it came from. I just buy stuff at garage sales and hope that it sells. Fair enough, but that leaves me not knowing the story behind this. I would love to know if it is old. If it's old, wow, I have a treasure on my hands. If I find out that it's not old at all, it's brand new, it could be from like Disney last year, because Disney does silhouettes. If it's a new silhouette, I'll be a little disappointed, but it's a really cool looking silhouette, and I could maybe do my own sort of art project with it, do something really cool with it. I don't love this backing. It's pretty, it's the fleur-de-lis, but it looks a little too new for what I want. So those were all of my antiques that I've bought. And now let's look at all of the books that I've read since my last video. So here's the pile, but actually this is not the complete pile because I donated a couple already. Okay, quickly, the ones that aren't here. The Bridges of Madison County by Robert James Waller. I read it, I thought it was very sad, and it really makes you think about love and life. I have not yet seen the movie. I know there's a movie with Meryl Streep and I think Clint Eastwood. So that's now on my list. Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill, which is horror. I did not love this, and I never know how in-depth I should go with negative reviews because it's so subjective and so many people love this book, so you may love it if you read it, but I personally did not like it. So the next book that I read was Sex and the City by Candace Bushnell, or Bushnell, I don't know. I guess this was a book form of columns from the original Sex and the City. It felt really interesting to see sort of a snapshot of the dating scene in the 90s. Sort of the topics at hand didn't really seem like things that people nowadays would talk about. And it's also interesting to know that the people from these columns from the 90s are now in like their 50s and 60s, and so I just wonder what they're all up to and how their lives played out thus far. I read The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner, which I had no idea what I was getting into starting this book, and if you've read this book, you know what I'm referring to. It genuinely felt like the most complex, complicated, convoluted book I've ever read. By the time I was done, I didn't even feel qualified to give the book a review, like a star rating or anything. It felt so above my level. There were entire sections of this book that I read every word and I did not even understand what was being talked about. I didn't know a number of characters, the genders of the characters. Different characters shared the same names, and it's all sort of stream of consciousness, Southern speak, and so I missed a lot, but I also found myself Googling a lot as I was reading it to try and make sense of what I was reading. But I did still feel emotion from it, like it carried weight, the different parts of this book. And yeah, at the end, I just feel like it was a very rewarding read, even though it was one of the hardest books I've ever read. If you read this book, I would love to know what your thoughts on it are. Okay, those are the books that I've donated, and the rest of them are here. I'm not gonna go in the order that I read them, I'm just gonna go in the order that you see here. So let's start. The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This is horror, and I did not really like it. It was okay, it was fine, but it didn't really grab me. I didn't find myself truly caring about the characters. But I know Grady Hendrix is a really popular author, and so I want to read more of his works, but this one in particular didn't do it for me. Hell House by Richard Matheson. This is also horror, if you couldn't have guessed. I also did not like this book, and I probably seem like I have really high standards. I don't necessarily, I just have really specific interests. Again, I don't know how in-depth to get into why specifically I didn't like this, but it sort of felt, I don't know, I don't want to say on camera. Night Stalks the Mansion. I just finished this one. This is the most recent one that I read. It is a book from 1978, I believe it was published, and actually in this version that I found in a used bookstore, there's an inscription from 1978, which I thought was really cool. And it is about a family that moves into an old house in Pennsylvania. I can't help but compare it to Amityville Horror because it's sort of a similar premise from around the same time in the 70s, where a family moves in and they experience these unexplained phenomena. I didn't love Amityville Horror, but I really enjoyed reading this. It felt so classic, like such a classic ghost story of these things that are happening in the house. And in horror, I love it when like a lot of people experience a haunting and it's not just like one person and no one believes them. Like in this book, things happen and everyone's a witness to it, and so that pleases me. The question is, can this book be believed? Did these things really happen? Is it the greatest book ever? No, but you might like it. Love Means Never Having to Say You're Sorry. Love Story. I've seen the movie. I saw it a long time ago, so I knew the premise, I knew what happens in it, but I still found myself crying at the end. Gorky Park by Martin Cruz Smith. I was interested in reading this because A, I had heard of it, and B, I've been to Gorky Park in Russia, and so I thought it might be interesting to see something set in that particular place. It has a lot to do with the black market, corruption, etc. It was a little bit hard to follow, so I'm not 100% sure I followed every tendril of storyline. I did learn about sables, which I had never heard of before reading this book, but it's a huge part of the book. Sables are, I guess, a small mammal whose fur is very valuable. I also watched the film with William Hurt. It was fine. Frankenstein. I'm not really sure how I feel about this book. I think I went into it with a number of preconceived notions of what the story would be, and I found myself a bit disappointed in the way that the story played out, but there were also really interesting and important, beautiful themes at play, especially for the time that it was written and by the age of the author to be exploring themes like that. You know, she was, what, 18? I think that in the future I'll reread this probably and see how my feelings change. Obviously, Frankenstein is an incredible story, and it has spawned and influenced so many works. So, a very important book, and I think it deserves a revisit. The next book here, I'm actually going to do a different one first. Oh, Charles Bukowski, Ham on Rye. I had no idea what Bukowski was about, what he was known for. I didn't know anything. Absolutely nothing, except for like the Modest Mouse song, Bukowski. I was recommended this book if I wanted to check him out, so I got it. And I loved the writing. The way that he writes was really fast-paced and clear, even though some of the themes that he goes into I was not a fan of, but still, like, his writing itself made it worth it. That being said, I then got Post Office. Reading Post Office was a different experience in that the writing was still good, but the story itself was really fragmented, and the themes that I referred to before were so blatant, and it's just a constant barrage of negative things, let's say. So I would give this like 0 stars and the other one 5. And so what is the difference? They both dealt with the same sort of stuff, I guess. The story here just didn't make it worth it for me. It felt kind of overdone with the way that he talks about certain people. By the time I got through this, I was ready to take a break from Bukowski for a while. The Stranger. The main character was sort of a non-character in how little he felt and expressed, and in that he became this interesting, objective observer. Maybe not objective, but his observations about life and guilt and justice and all of these things were interesting to see through his eyes. Baby's First Voltaire. Did I already talk about this? I can't remember if I talked about this in my previous video. I don't remember when exactly I read this, but if this is a repeat, I'm sorry. I thought this was humorous, but I wasn't sure that I was understanding every intended bit of satire and irony, but I was proud of myself when I finished it to be able to say, oh, Voltaire? Yeah, I've read Voltaire. Ghost Radio by Leopoldo Gaut. This was another impulse buy. I saw it at a used bookstore and decided to pick it up just based on the fact that it has the word ghost in the title. But also, I really like radio stations as a setting for horror. I base that possibly entirely on the movie Pontypool, which is a horror film. If you haven't seen it, it takes place in a radio station. I don't know how to put my finger on it exactly, what about radio stations I like as a setting for horror, but I did enjoy this book. It felt very dreamlike, and my favorite parts were the bits where people would call in and talk about spooky things that had happened to them. It's so embarrassing to say, I don't know if I understood the ending, but I'm not sure I 100% understood the ending of it, but it was still an enjoyable read throughout. I'm thinking of ending things. I enjoyed this book. It's horror. I think there's a movie now, actually. I enjoyed it. It's a great example of when things just feel wrong in general. Everything feels slightly off. I really liked the tension in it, but I'm not sure that I loved the ending. Last but not least, A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. Tremblay. I adored this book. It tells the story of events that happened to a family as seen through the eyes of an 8-year-old girl. And I've read horror books where children are written like the author has never met a child in his life, whereas this perspective felt so genuine. It just felt so spot on for how children at that age would talk and process things. And on top of that, her perspective is watching something that her older sister is going through, and I really relate to it a lot. As a younger sister of an older sister, I felt really sad reading it, and I love sadness and horror, just an air of melancholy. And so this spoke to me on a number of levels. Will it speak to you? I don't know. This has to do, this may be a spoiler, with an exorcism. I am not a fan of exorcisms. Not that I'm not a fan, I just don't find it particularly captivating or scary at all. But something about this plot as seen through the eyes of the sister, watching her sister go through something, the ambiguity of it all, which I think is important in sort of the whole idea of this book, the ambiguity. Something about it really spoke to me and it stuck with me. If you have read this, let me know in the comments what you thought of it. Actually, now that I'm looking, I also read Breakfast at Tiffany's, which I liked. The House of the Vampire by George Sylvester Viereck, which was written in the early 1900s. That was okay. I also read The Shining. Did I mention that in my last video? I don't know. That was just okay for me. I feel like most of my reviews were just, it's okay. As always, if you have any recommendations on books, please recommend them in the comments below. I love horror and classics, I guess, or anything moody, atmospheric, just whatever book you think is really, really good, let me know. And let me know why, maybe something about it. I'll definitely be adding them to my I want to read list, which is gigantic. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment below, follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you next time.